Hello and welcome to my channel, The Curious Coder. This video is part of my Springboot interview series, and today we are going to talk about a very important topic, mappers in Spring Boot. Let's look at a very common scenario. Suppose you have a user entity representing your database table and a user response DTO that you want to send to the front end. Now these are two separate classes, but their data is related. It's possible that the field names might be different because in your entity class you want to follow a certain structure, but you might have a different contract with the front end. So that's why in most applications we need to convert between these objects regularly. Now the problem, writing this mapping manually means a lot of boilerplate code. You will have tons of getters and setters and repeative conversions that make your code less readable and harder to maintain. So to simplify this, we have a powerful tool called MapStruct. It's a compile time code generator that helps you write clean, type-safe mappers with almost no boilerplate code. You just define your mapping interface and MapStruct generates the implementation for you. So let's go through the video and understand how it works. So let me give you a code walkthrough first. I'll start with this user controller. In this, I have created this API /user/id. This basically fetches the user from database using the ID as an input. And in this API, we call the method of user service get user by ID. And here it's calling another method find by ID, which is inside user repository. Okay, so user repository extends the JPA repository, and this find by ID is an inbuilt method of JPA. Okay, so basically it will query the database and give me the user entry from which is against this ID. Alright, now you can see that this gives a user object, but we want a user response object in the end. Okay, in the API response, what I need is I need to send a user response. Okay, so this is a separate class and user is a separate class. Okay, so I'll show you both of them. First, in this user class, it's an entity class. It's mapped to this table user. It has these fields ID, username, password, date of birth, and status. Okay, so I'll also show you the database. In this, we have this user table, and right now we have only two entries. Okay, now if I look at the user response, it also has the same fields, but the name is a bit different. Okay, some of the fields have different names and different return types. So let's just compare these two. So in user, you can see we have ID, password, and status. And in user response, also we have ID, password, and status. But here in user response, we have the field as name, but in this entity, we have it as username. Okay. Similarly, we have this date of birth, but in user response, we have it as DOB. Okay, and you can also see that it's a string value, but in this user class, it is local date. Okay, so this is the difference. Now, how can I map it? Like, let's see the most basic way. So let's say I'm not using any mapper. Okay, as of now, I'm not using any mapper. So how will I write the code? So I will have to create an object of user response. And in this, I will have to explicitly set all its fields one by one. Okay, so first I'll set the ID using user.getID. Then I can set the name using user.getUsername. Okay, then we can also set the DOB using user.getDate of birth. But since the date of birth is a local date, that's why I would have to convert this into a string format. Okay, so for that we use this date time formatter. So I would basically, what I'm trying to show is that I will have to write this formatting logic myself. Okay, then similarly we can set the password and the status. Okay, using user.getPassword and user.getStatus. And then in the end I'll return the user response object. Okay, so let me show you. Great, so it started on 8080, and if I hit this API, cool. So you can see we got all the data in the response format. Okay, we have DOB and name. Alright, so we got the data in this format, user response. All right, but the problem is that I have written here a lot of boilerplate code, and I did all the mapping by myself. Okay, so we can avoid that by using a simple mapper interface. Okay, so that's what we are going to see. So it's quite simple. We just have to add a dependency in pom.xml file. This is the dependency org.mapstruct. Okay, and if you're using lombok in your project, like lombok as in these annotations at the rate all args constructor at the rate data, so for all these we use lombok. So if you are using lombok, then you would also have to add this dependency. Okay, lombok mapstruct binding, basically it makes the two of them compatible. Okay, and you also have to add a plugin here, this maven compiler plugin, in which we will have to give this annotation path processors. Okay, annotation processor paths, and in this we have to add lombok, the mapstruct binding, and the mapstruct processor. Okay, these three we have to add. So if you won't give this plugin, then IntelliJ won't properly implement your mapper implementations. Okay, mapper interface. So that's why if you want your project to run properly on IntelliJ, then you have to add this plugin. Okay, but dependency wise, this mapstruct is the dependency that you need. And if you're using lombok along with it, then you will need an extra dependency, which is this one. Okay, so now what I'll do is I'll just create a simple mapper class. Okay, and I'll show you how. Let's say I name it as user mapper interface. Okay, so we'll create this interface that will have all the mapping logic, and I will have to add this annotation at the rate mapper, and here I will have to give component model is equal to spring. Okay, like this. Now I'll add a method in this interface. Let's say I call this method map user to user response. Okay, I'll just declare a method, and its return type will be user response, because in the end we need a user response, and in its argument we'll pass a user object. Okay, like this. So I'll just declare a method like this, and actually that's it. This is all you need to do when you have to write a mapper. You just create an interface and declare a method inside it, and automatically Spring Boot will handle it. Okay, the MapStruct dependency will handle it. Okay, so it will this method will have an implementation when you will rerun the project. Okay, so Spring Boot will automatically give an implementation of this method. And now instead of instead of writing all this, I'll just create a mapper object here like this, private mapper user mapper is equal to mappers dot get mapper. Okay, so by calling this method we can get the user mapper reference, user mapper dot class. Okay, so we have the object of user mapper, and instead of writing all this code, I'll just remove this and simply I'll say user mapper dot map user to user response, and in this method I'll pass this user object. Okay, so we'll pass this object, and this will return me a user response object. Okay, user response is equal to mapper dot map. All right, that's it. So all that mapping logic, we didn't write any of that. We just added this method map user to user response, and you can see that already Spring Boot has created an implementation of it. So I'll show you the implementation as well. Okay, so right now we cannot see that implementation because we have not rerun the project. But let's say if I run it like this, great. So the project is upon 8080, and you can see that we have an implementation. Okay, but there is one thing, it's only implementing ID, password and status. Okay, why? Because as of now these are the three fields that have the same name. Okay, ID, password and status are same in user as well as user response, and we have two fields with different names. Okay, so we have not mentioned anything about that in this mapper. That's why it doesn't know that how to map those fields. Okay, because it does not know to which field it has to map username. Okay, so we have not said that. So for that we use an annotation @mapping. Okay, like this. And here we'll define the source as well as the target. So the source is this username. Okay, we are using username like this, and the target will be name. Okay, that's it. So the fields that have different names, for those fields you will have to add this annotation @mapping, and for the fields who already have the same name you don't have to do anything. All right, now I'll rerun the project. As of now I'm not doing anything about the date because date has a different data type as well, so I'll show you that later. But let's see the most basic case right now. Great, so it's up on 8080, and if I hit the API again, you see again we got the data. Alright, we got the ID and the field as name, not as username, then the password and the status. But we didn't get the date because we didn't map the date. Okay, date was local date, so and its field name was date of birth. So as of now I have not mapped it, but you can see the implementation that it automatically sets the name as user.getUsername. Okay, now let's say if I want to map date as well. So for that as well, I don't have to write any conversion logic. I'll just give the source as, I think it's date of birth. Yeah, source as date of birth and target as DOB. Okay, so even though it's local date and this is string, you'll observe that mapper will automatically write the conversion logic for you. Okay, so I'll just rerun. Okay, so if we see the implementation now, you can see that it has automatically written all the formatting logic. Okay, and now if I hit the API, great, we got the date as well in a string format and the field name is DOB. Okay, so this is how we can use mapper to convert one DTO into another. Okay, now there are several different things that we can also do. For example, let's say I don't want to map all the fields. Okay, let's say user has many fields, but I don't want to map all the fields. Let's say password has some sensitive information and I don't want to show that to front end. So for that, what I can do is I can just write it like this @mapping. I'll just say target is equal to password, and I'll ask the compiler to ignore it. Okay, so target is password and ignore is equal to true. Now if I rerun, okay, started on 8080, and if you see the implementation, you can see that it has not implemented password. Okay, and if I hit the API, great, so you can see that there is no password in this API response. All right, now what else? Let's say I want to give a default value to some field. Okay, by default value I mean that if that field is null, then in that case I want to give a default value to it. Okay, for example, we have this status, and you can see that in the database we have this status as null for this second entry. Okay, so since as of now we have not provided any default value, so if I hit my API, you will see that we won't get any status. Okay, you can see that we won't get any status because status is null. So for that I can give a default value like this. I'll just have to add it again at the rate mapping, and in this source will be status and target will also be status, and I can just set a default value. Okay, so for default value I'm saying the default value is inactive. So this means if we get the source as null, then the target will be set to the default value. Okay, so I'll rerun it. Great, so project is up, and you can see that it has given a default implementation to the status. Okay, you can see that if user.getStatus is not null, then it sets the status, but if it is null, then it gives it a default implementation. All right, so if I hit the API, great, so this time we get the status as inactive. All right, now I'll show you one more thing. Like we have seen that we can ignore the fields by adding that field and just writing ignore is equal to true. But let's say I want to ignore all the fields by default and I only want to map a specific field. Okay, for example, I'll comment all this out. Okay, let's say I only want to map the username and I don't want to map any of the other field. Okay, but if I will do it like this, all the fields which have the same name like ID, password and status, they will be mapped automatically. Okay, by default they will be mapped, and since I have added @mapping, so username will also be mapped. But what I want is that only username should be mapped and I don't want any of the fields. Okay, let's say that is my use case. So for that I will have to add another annotation that says @bean mapping, and here I'll add ignore by default is equal to true. Okay, so this means that by default it will ignore all the fields and it will map only the field that you have explicitly specified. Okay, let me rerun. Okay, so the project started, and you can see that in the implementation we have only mapped the name field. Okay, and if I'll hit the API, we get only the name field. Okay, now let's take a little complicated scenario. Let's say I want to map one DTO using two separate DTOs. Okay, for example, here we are mapping this user response using only this user object, but you can see I have another class contact. Okay, this is an entity which is mapped with this table contact, and it has the contact information. Okay, the mobile number and the email ID. Okay, so I'll show in database as well. We have select star from contact. All right, and you can see it has two entries against both the users. Okay, the mobile number and the email ID. So I want to give this information also in the API response. Okay, but this information is in a separate class, and the rest of the user information is in the user class. All right, so how will I do that? first in the response I will have to add these fields, of course, because then only I will be able to map. So let's say I want a string, and let's say it's the mobile number, and we have private string email ID. Okay, so I added these two fields with these two names, okay, mobile and email ID. Okay, and in the service class I'll also fetch a contact object like this, contact repository. Okay, I'll have to auto-wire the contact repository first. Contact repository, yeah. So I'll just auto-wire, and like user I'll do the same thing, contact repository dot find by ID, and I'll pass the user ID. Okay, and if there is no contact against it, then I'll just throw some exception. Okay, so this is a little exception handling that I do. Yeah, I'll just copy this, new runtime exception, contact not found. Okay, contact not found. All right. Okay, so let me bring it here. Yeah, so using the contact repository I'm finding a contact object. Fine, so now I have two different objects and I want to create a user response in the end. Okay, so how will I handle this in mapper? I'll just remove all this for now. What we are going to do is let's say as of now let's change this method name. Okay, because now we are mapping user and contact to user response. Okay, so this makes more sense, and in this argument we'll have to add another argument, contact. Okay, and now we'll have to explicitly map all the fields using @mapping. So I'll show you how. Again, it's not that complicated. What we do, instead of in the source, instead of directly writing the ID, what I'll do is I'll just have to mention that this ID is coming from this user. Okay, so I'll map it like this, user dot ID, and I'll map it to the target value of ID. Okay, like this. Similarly, we have other fields, so one by one I'll write for all of them. We have username, so user dot username, I'll map it to name because in user response we have name. All right, then we have user dot password, so that I don't want to map. So what I'll do, I'll just simply say target is equal to password. Okay, target is the password and ignore is equal to true, so we'll just simply ignore this. Then we have the date of birth, so we'll have to write user dot date of birth, and I'll map it to DOB. Okay, like this. So we have taken all the user, no, okay, status is left, and we'll again add the status, user dot status as the status, because in target we have it as status only. Yes, we have it as status, and I'll also give a default value as we gave in the previous example. Default value is inactive. All right, so I did the null handling as well. Now I want to map all the contact information. So from contact, again I don't need the user ID because I've already taken the ID here, so I'll just map the mobile number and the email. So we have this mobile number, this will be contact dot mobile number to the field mob. Okay, like this, and at last I'll map contact dot email. Okay, contact dot email with the email ID field. All right, like this. So that's it, I have mapped all the fields. And okay, I'm getting an error in user service. Why? Because okay, I've changed the name user, and let me just change it here as well, user and contact to user response. Okay, and in this argument I'll pass user as well as contact. Got it? So we have written this method using these two variables. We are passing the source values, and we already know how to pass the target values. Okay, so I'll rerun the project. Great, so the project is up, and first let me show you the implementation. We have this implementation, and you can see we created a user response object, and it sets all the fields related to user. Okay, user.getID, username, then the date of birth with the formatting logic, and then status with the default logic, and then it sets the contact information. Okay, contact.mobile number and contact.getEmail. All right, so if I hit the API, great. So you see that it works perfectly. We have the ID, name, DOB as in we wrote it like this only. In the response, we wrote it like DOB. We don't have password because we ignored it. We have status as inactive because the status was null. And we got the mobile number and email ID information as well. Okay, that also in the correct response, correct format. Okay, so now I'll show you one more thing, one last thing that I want to show you here. So this is a bit more complicated, but again, this also we can do. We can provide a custom implementation while mapping. Okay, so here it's directly mapping, but let's say I want to perform some kind of operation while I'm doing the mapping logic. Okay, so I'll take a very simple example. Let's say I don't want to give the mobile number information as it is. Okay, it's also confidential information, but I unlike password, I don't want to ignore it. I simply want to mask the mobile number. Okay, I'll just hide the first four digits. So for that I want to write an implementation. So what can I do? I'll just create another method in this interface. Let's say static string get phone number, and inside the arguments also I'll pass a string value. Okay, I'll tell you why I have passed this string value. And here I'll just simply write a logic return. We can write it like this, 4 stars, and then whatever the phone number was, phone dot substring. Let's say we start from the fourth index. Okay, because we have already taken the first four as star. So the 0 1 2 3 index we have already taken, and we'll start from the fourth index. Okay, like this. So what this will do is it will convert the phone that we get in the input, and it will return this value at in the end, which I am returning from here. Okay, but I have to somehow give this logic here in the mapping. So for that I add another annotation at the rate named. Okay, and in this I will have to name this method something. So let's say I name it something like mask phone, and the place where I'm actually mapping the mobile number. At this place, what I'll do is I'll just write qualified by name is equal to, and here I'll write the name of the method. Okay, this name basically what I wrote in at the rate name. So this will be mask phone. Okay, like this. So what I'm saying is that when we are doing this mapping, when we are mapping mobile number into MOB, in that case we first run this method qualified by name, and this phone will actually be the source. Okay, so whatever the source that we have here, this mobile number, this will be passed here, and it will be converted into this, and then this method will return some value, which is basically whatever we write here, and that value will be mapped finally in this MOB. Okay, so I'll just rerun and show you. Great, so the project is up, and if you see the implementation, you can see that for mobile number, when it was explicitly when it was setting the mobile number, it first called this method get phone number. Okay, so this is the same method that we created, and in this get phone number, it's the source mobile number that's being passed, the one that we have from the contact object, that is passed in the arguments, and this gets converted to this, okay, phone dot substring. So this will be converted, and the converted phone number is then set into this mob. Okay, it's then finally set in the target. So if I hit the API, you'll see. Great. So we get the mobile number like this. Okay, so this is how we can also give any custom implementation if we want to. Okay, so these are the different kind of things that we can do using the mapper interface, and it's actually a very good practice to use this interface because it makes our life quite easy, and it keeps our code very clean. Okay,